When I first started writing songs, I was writing from my voice. But then the type of songs that I was writing, they varied in style and identity from, well, or lack thereof, from one song to the next. And so because the voice is such a unbridled instrument, it can be difficult to define a sound or have a consistency from one song to the next, which is why I picked up an instrument, and in this case the guitar, because it would kind of ground me in some way, whereas the voice wouldn't ground me so much in the way that I needed to, in terms of trying to cultivate my identity. One of the first sort of decent songs I wrote before I could play anything was Kiss from a Rose. And I wrote that from the voice. And that was basically me trying to emulate what an orchestra would do, which is why you have the da 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 ba 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 da da ba 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 da da. That's why all of those bits, they're all string parts or orchestral parts. And it's me trying to imitate what an orchestra would do. I remember I got a 4-track, a Tascam 244. Do you remember those things? And I was trying to figure out how to multi-track on a cassette tape. So that's why I came up with all of those parts. A girlfriend bought me a Porter Studio because she said I was wasting my time trying to be a fashion designer. And she told me that I should be writing music and that I should get on with it. So she bullied me into committing to music. She was right. So when I started to play an instrument, and in this case, the guitar, I learned the E shape and the A shape. Somebody told me that with those two shapes, if you move them up and down the neck and play, bar chords, you could pretty much play every chord that you would need to write a song. The E shape and the A shape. So the first song I wrote was but we're never gonna survive unless we get a little crazy. We're never gonna survive. Then it progressed into that. And what it goes there for is to unlock the door. But those around him, they criticize and sleep. Through a fractal on a breaking wall, then maybe miracles will happen as we trip. But we're never gonna survive. Those are those bar chords again. We get a little crazy. It's just those two shapes. So then I would color it. So there's your C, right? And then your G, and then your D and A, but then there's your C, and I live and die by that chord. But which just sounds a little bit, there's your C, which is, great, but, oh, it's lovely. I was writing all of these songs and I couldn't get a record deal. I couldn't even get arrested. All the majors said, oh, well, he's got an interesting voice, but we don't know what he is. Like, what is he? How do we market him? Is he singing R&B? Well, not really, but then he's kind of singing rock. But then why is he black if he's doing that? Like, where do we put this guy? It's a valid concern, if you're a record company, because essentially the fact that you sell records is neither here nor there. You are a business. You're like an investment company, and you're looking for a return on your investment. And if you can't see that, then you're less likely to invest in it. And they couldn't invest in me, even though they kind of liked what they heard. While they were telling me this, I, of course, just thought they were all deaf. I thought, what do you mean? Like, there was no question in my mind that this was, once I'd committed, this was going to be my chosen path in life. And it was going to be it wasn't even going to be what I was doing. It was what I was. And so I couldn't understand why they couldn't hear what I was hearing. So I'd written all of these songs, but then when I wrote Crazy, it was different because it didn't sound like any of these artists that I was trying to emulate or do a version of. For the first time, I'd written a song that sounded like me, and it didn't sound like anyone else. And I attribute that to the guitar. It allowing another or more of my identity to step forward. For about 32 years, I played mostly acoustic. I would sit in Albert's store on Sunset, Guitars R Us, and I'd sit there all day when I first came to LA, and I'd play a bunch of acoustic guitars. I never really ventured into electrics, even though I have a ton of electric guitars and a ton of amps and obviously pedals. But I saw them more as pieces of art, and still do. I just don't see them as a nice guitar or a nice pedal. I see the hours behind them. I see, wow, somebody really committed hours and energy and their soul. And the whole thing's energy. In any case, our existence is just energy. That's all it is. And I think one of the primary purposes of art is to inspire you to do something great or do something exceptional, or in my case, to create another piece of art. So that's how I see them. And so when I'm holding something, it is a manifestation of their energy and their soul. And I feel that, and it inspires me just as much holding it or seeing it or admiring it or acknowledging the craftsmanship. That inspires me as much as playing it. And so while I would collect them, I was never that much of an electric player, but it's only in the last 2.5 years that I ventured into playing more electric, because I decided that I wanted to write from electric. I generally have some kind of real low, transparent, low gain drive. That would probably be the Greer Lightspeed. A lot of love for that pedal, the Greer Lightspeed. I see that, the hype is justified. It's tough. Kingsley Page, TS maybe. The brown amplification protein. That should go down in history as a truly legendary pedal. If you manage to get a bad sound out of the protein, then it's not the pedal. Then I'd have trem, under modulation, chorus and trem. You just can't beat amp trem. And my amp of choice being a Two Rock Joey Landreth signatures the trem. I haven't heard a better trem circuit than the harmonic and bias trem in that amp. It's godly. But then we're talking about pedals, and so I would have to say the Bennett Audio Lighthouse, Canadian guys. Wow, that is a fantastic trem pedal, and that's the one you'll see on my board. It's great with its harmonic trem, great with its bias trem. It's got your three, your choice of your square, your triangular, or your sine, and it has a really unique feature to it, which it has a preamp on one side, which I think is a lot of the reason it sounds great. And then that leaves chorus. That's a tough one. You know, Jackson Audio make a spectacular chorus, and I like tri-chorus, you know, like, a lot. But if I was pushed, I would probably say the Free the Tone tri-avatar. Delay, okay, that delay's got to be Keeley Halo. You know, if we're doing that, either the core or the original one, either one works. You know, reverb, you got to go two categories. You got to go your ambient reverb, and then you got to go your daily driver reverb. If you're not using the amp for reverb, if it was purely ambient, I would say the slower. That would be the stereo version of the slow. You've got to have your everyday reverb, and the slower doesn't really do that great. It can, but it's not that great. So a good pedal that kind of caters for both of those subcategories, I would say, with the Free the Tone. Ambi Space Reverb, I think it's called Free the Tone. Those guys in Japan, they really know what they're doing. So, you know, there are two things that I look for when it comes to, you know, pedals, or particularly delays and reverbs and modulation pedals. I'm not that big on MIDI. Simply because my workload is not the first guitarist in the band. I'm a singer that kind of plays guitar. I'm not playing on every song, so I don't have to remember a whole set like my guitarist Zach has to. You know, so I don't have a set list that I'm playing on every song. I play as an accompaniment to my voice. And therefore MIDI's kind of wasted on me and sort of above my pay grade. So I tend to like pedals that have three things: that sound great, first of all, that have presets if possible, and that are really, really easy to use. Like, when I say easy, I don't mean in terms of their complexity, I mean in terms of accessibility. Can I just look at it and go? Each pedal that you buy, you have to give it a certain amount of time. Even the ones that you don't necessarily particularly gel with at the beginning, you got to understand that this is what these guys do. Like, it's their art, and they hear something and they try and create it, or they try and manifest whatever it is they're hearing, right? And so each pedal requires a certain amount of time for you to sit with and really get into it and find its sweet spots and find what it wants to do and what it doesn't want to do, and then you decide whether that's for you. I saw them more as pieces of art, and still do, artists' interpretations of like 2 or 3 amp circuits, for the most part, pedals that is, and amps. I tend to gravitate more towards the kind of the US style. So whether that's, you know, well, there is only one really, like the, you know, your Blackface and your Fender. So I tend to, maybe perhaps because I'm a singer, I tend to like more of a scooped sound. And my 2 favorites, the 2 best amps, Two Rock and Benson. I think what Eli and Chris do with their voicings of amps is unequaled. They're the most critical and the most forgiving all at the same time, two rock amps. I mean, and it depending on which amp you're talking about. You know, if you go for something like a Joey Landreth that has masses of headroom, what is that, 100 watt, I think it is, as opposed to a vintage deluxe, which is like 35 and 40. You know, the Joey Landreth has so much headroom, but it's so forgiving, and it is so dynamically superior that, you know, it provides this incredible, the perfect pedal platform. But then, you know, you look at what Chris is doing at Benson with that, particularly with that Monarch. If you are a purist that wants saturation from your amps, and you want a beautifully focused sound live that you're not going to have to do a lot of futzing around with, then it doesn't really get better than the Benson Monarch. That is lightning in a bottle. That amp, it's beautiful. You know, there's an old saying: players play, coaches coach, and cheerleaders cheer. And I was a singer, and whilst I could kind of write a decent song and carry a tune in a bucket, making records, that's a whole different thing. Like making the kind of records that I was interested in being a part of. That is a different skill set, and I do not know how to make records. That is left for geniuses like Trevor Horn. Trust, you know, that is a key component of any successful relationship, whether in a band or making records in the studio or becoming an artist. Trust is key, because you trust in your Trevor Horn, and he rewards you with something that is way beyond your wildest dreams. Trevor and his late wife, Jill Sinclair, my mentor, she would insist that my voice was loud in the track. And you got to understand, this came at a time, the end of the 80s, where the vogue was to mix the vocal within a track. Before, you know, the albums that Trevor brilliantly produced, no one was mixing their vocals that loud. If you go back and listen to my first two records, not that you would, because I'm sure you've got better things to do, but if you go back and listen to them, one thing you'll notice is that the vocal is alarmingly loud. It's right on top of the track. And Jill's argument was that I didn't pay all of this money for a voice for you to go burying it in the track. Turn it up. She would come in and, like, you know, insist that it would be louder. And of course, these were the days of you know, pre-auto tune. So, you know, there was nothing that would be fixed in the mix. You know, I would have to sing it until I sang it in tune. And Trevor, you know, all credit to him, he would a lot of the times not like a lot of EQ on my voice. He would have it bone dry a lot. He wouldn't be shy about doing that. Tiny bit of compression maybe. I preferred my voice, the way that my voice sounded on Trevor's U67, his Neumann. I begged him for years to give that to me, and he wouldn't part with it. But that's what you'll find you'll find a combination of that and a B&K of all mics, which is not really a vocal mic. It's more string instruments and pianos. It's awful to sing into because it looks like, you know, phallus. It's a pointy thing. It's the most unromantic thing to sing into. What Trevor would do a lot of the times, he'd put a U67 up on the mic, and he'd put the B&K next to it so that I felt like I was singing into the U67. Yeah, that's my kind of vocal mic of choice, but honestly, I'll sing into a paper cup. I don't really care. I kind of go up and down with microphones. You know, you can get seduced by mics, you know, like I'll sing into anything. I really do not care. I'll sing into a SM7 if the cap fits, you know. It's still going to sound like me. So I just was lucky enough and fortunate that I met a producer who wasn't scared by any kind of crazy harebrained idea I would come up with. He would just see it as a challenge. And he was a fan. And I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, but he was a fan of my voice. And so, again, I was very lucky in that I found a producer who was probably the one guy that would know what to do with me. Now, I owe everything to him in terms of, you know, becoming the success I've had and becoming an artist that I'm proud of. I really owe that to a few people, but Trevor being right at the top of that. Trust in yourself more, trust in what you naturally do. There's always going to be that work ethic and integrity that, you know, Trevor and the great engineers that worked on my records instilled in me. but there does need to be a certain element of trust where you just trust in the process.